Welcome to a brand new episode of CNB Bazaar Buzz. You're on the NDTV network, and we're going to get you all the latest news, all the newest comparisons, and everything else in between this week on the show. So before we get going, here's what is in store. It's the battle of the compact sedans. The new Toyota Yaris takes on the Hyundai Verna. American cool with the Indian bobber. And the tete-a-tete with Charles Trump, the head of operations for Volvo India. So let's get started straight with that big first story. It's the new Toyota Yaris taking on the benchmark of the segment, the Hyundai Verna. Now the Hyundai Verna has taken on the likes of the Honda City and the Ciaz in the past and has come out triumphant. So, can the Yaris steal away its crown? Well, I drove both of them and my answer is quite definitive this time around.
The compact sedan segment in India is packed to the brim with cars like the Maruti Suzuki Ciaz, the Volkswagen Vento, the Skoda Rapid, and of course, the popularity contest winners like the Honda City. Last year, Hyundai updated the Verna, giving it a whole bunch of new tech, and it quickly regained its benchmark status. And now, a new car will challenge the Verna for its crown. The Toyota Yaris. The Yaris is Toyota's first attempt at making a compact sedan in India, and in terms of the way it looks, it does not disappoint. It has a premium face, a nice raised rear that reminds us in many ways of the Corolla, and enough trinkets to keep one occupied. You get projector headlamps, LED daytime running lights, LED tail lamps, etc. And that signature Toyota front end looks quite distinct too. But there is a chink in its armor. And no, it's not those 15-inch small alloy wheels, it's the fact that the Yaris physically looks smaller than it is. Comparing it to the Verna, the Yaris is just 15mm shorter in terms of length, but with rounded edges, as we mentioned earlier. To the common man, it looks much smaller. Incidentally, the Yaris is just 1mm narrower, but 20mm shorter in terms of height. The Verna, on the other hand, looks larger than it is. With its wider grille, more aggressive face, and those yummy 16-inch two-tone diamond-cut wheels, it checks off all the right boxes. Compared to the Yaris, it also has a more balanced design of the two, and according to me, also the one that looks more expensive than it actually is, especially if you have this top-spec version with the sunroof. Though in the minds of most the diesel is a more popular engine, the compact sedan category is one of those rare few that swings more to the petrol side. In fact, 70% of the cars sold in this category are petrol. It is no wonder then that Toyota has launched the Yaris only with a petrol engine. But when it comes to petrol engines in this segment, the Verna is apex predator. The 1.6-litre engine under the hood makes 121 bhp of peak power, making it the most powerful engine in the category, and it pulls well. Mated with a 6-speed gearbox, the engine revs freely, and even though it does get slightly vibey around the top end, it gets up to 3-digit speeds really quickly while still having in-gear acceleration when you need it.
Now compared to the Verna, the Yaris has a slightly smaller 1.5-litre engine. It is still a 4-cylinder though, and expectedly it is lower on horsepower as compared to the Verna, lower on torque, and also lower in terms of fuel economy. But while the Verna feels great to drive on the road because it is more powerful on paper, the Yaris feels great to drive on the road because it is a very free revving engine. Red line is all the way to 6,500 RPM, but that isn't really the point of this car. You aren't going to drive this car like it's on a racetrack all the time. You aren't going to rev the pants off it. This car is meant to be driven sedately, comfortably, almost like a gentleman. And in terms of that, it is actually nicer to drive than the Verna because this engine is smoother. NVH levels are considerably lower than the Verna, and that's what these are all about. Comfort, comfort, and more comfort.
And since it's all about comfort, it's all about how nice that interior feels. Starting with the Yaris, like a typical Toyota, everything is simple and looks uncluttered. The interior color is beige, as with most of the cars in the segment, while the dashboard gets a black treatment with a very cool faux leather stitching mold line. The central console is flanked with brushed silver panels, while the actual console is deep gloss black. And while it does get a nice set of plastics all around, it really does lose out big when it comes to infotainment. The Yaris gets no Apple CarPlay, no Android Auto, and that is a big no-no when it comes to today's connected age. On the other hand, the Verna gets a ton of features over the Yaris. A larger and frankly nicer screen, Apple CarPlay, inbuilt navigation, Android Auto, a sunroof, and the most important feature on any car in this segment, cooled seats. Particularly useful when temperatures outside are 45 degrees. The Verna is also slightly better built too, and with a brownish shade to the interior, it also offers a slightly fresher look. And now for a change, I'm actually going to give up that front driver's seat to a colleague and see how it feels in the back, a place where most buyers of this segment usually end up in any case.
So first, the Verna. Now, I would rather be in the front seat in this particular car because it's about 45 degrees outside and it does have the cooling seats like I mentioned earlier, but in all fairness, the rear is actually nice too. It's got very well contoured seats. The backrest is quite nice, although a little under thigh support, a little more under thigh support, and a little more upright seating would be nicer, especially if you're going to have a longer distance to travel. This does feel a little sunk in. Great for the city though. It does have leather interior all around, as I mentioned, and again, because it does have a sunroof, the cabin does feel generally airier. Now, as compared to the Verna, the Yaris is actually 15 mm shorter overall, but wheelbase wise, it's actually 50 mm shorter, and that translates to less leg space in the rear, and it is a little more cramped. But the advantage the Yaris offers, you sit slightly higher, which means you have a less sort of claustrophobic feeling of the cabin because you have a bigger window too, and it is a more natural seating position, so it does feel more comfortable. Now, in terms of interiors, the top of the line spec does get leather. This one gets cloth, and even the cloth is actually nicer in terms of finish. It's softer, more plush, and the Yaris does genuinely feel like a nice, comfortable car at the rear. And of course, you do get this really cool AC system on the roof, which sort of flows air through, and because it's on the top, it means AC for everybody, as compared to the Verna, which has the vents on the bottom, which means sometimes if you're sitting by the window, you might not get that airflow as well as this system will give you.
Passenger comfort also has a lot to do with the way the car rides, and both the Verna and the Yaris have a chassis setup that leans more towards comfort rather than handling prowess. Both have a considerable amount of body roll, and both feel a little uncomfortable while being handled by the scruff of their neck. However, in a battle of equals, the Yaris does have that typically Japanese sense of confidence hidden underneath that soft chassis. While most cars in the segment offer airbags on all variants, the Hyundai Verna offers 2 as standard and 6 on the top spec variants. The Yaris though is the new benchmark when it comes to safety in this segment. Not only do you get 7 airbags across all variants, you also get disc brakes on all 4 wheels too. And the difference is very obvious. The Yaris does showcase a level of maturity under hard braking, the likes of cars many segments above do. But is it enough to put the Yaris on top of the food chain in this segment? Not really. The Verna does trump it with more space, better performance, better features, more fuel economy, and all of that while still beating the Yaris on price by being almost 1.5 lakh rupees cheaper. It is a no contest then. While the Yaris is a very impressive car, especially for passengers seated at the rear, as a product, the Verna is still the king of the hill.
So there you have it. Even though the Yaris is still a very, very competent vehicle in its own right, Hyundai Verna is still the car to buy in that sort of compact sedan segment. And now we move on to something much cooler from the United States. It's the Indian Scout Bobber. Pritham has been having a go on it and he's quite enjoyed it. Have a look.
It's drop-dead gorgeous, and it was judged the best-looking two-wheeler at the 2018 NDTV Car and Bike Awards. Meet the Indian Scout Bobber. The cruiser, which shares the same basic platform of the Indian Scout, but it gets more appeal, more road presence, and is a guaranteed head-turner. The shiny chrome is almost non-existent on the Scout Bobber. The chopped fenders complete the bobbed look, and it is complemented by fatter rubber with block pattern. The single-pod instrument panel is new and lends a touch of premiumness. The tracker-style handbar is new, and the footpeg position has been changed as well.
The Indian Scout has always been an entertaining cruiser, and now we have the Indian Scout Bobber. Now, Indian Motorcycle has given a slightly different flavor to the Indian Scout, so it looks more aggressive. Fatter tires, blacked out look, chopped fenders, and steering is new, repositioned footpegs, but overall I think it looks absolutely fantastic, doesn't it?
Swing a leg over the bike and the different riding position is immediately apparent. Under the skin though, the Scout Bobber retains the same 1133cc engine V-twin, which puts out 94 bhp of power and 97 Nm of torque. And it moves with urgency the moment you slot it into first and accelerate it through the gears. The Scout Bobber will hit over 100 km/h before you even realize it, and the engine begs to be ridden hard and fast. But more impressive is the way this cruiser handles. Maneuvering through traffic isn't much of a problem, and the Scout Bobber's agile handling and brilliant performance will keep you ahead of most motorists when the light turns green. For weekend duties and the occasional around-town ride, the Scout Bobber will make you smile inside your helmet every single time you take it out for a ride.
The Indian Scout Bobber feels a little bit more aggressive than the standard Indian Scout. Well, that's because the riding position has changed somewhat. The foot pegs have been brought closer to the rider, the handlebar is new, so the riding position has changed and makes it feel more aggressive. Performance is more or less the same because it's the same engine, puts out about 100 bhp of power, just over 97 odd Nm of torque. But it's quite the handler. This bike begs to be leaned around a corner. The only dampener is the foot pegs scraped too soon. And the suspension, the seat's taller than the standard Scout, although the suspension has been lowered, but it's slightly on the stiffer side. As long as you're riding on nice, smooth tarmac, it's absolutely fine, but the moment the road gets rough, it becomes a little uncomfortable.
Yes, the ride is taut and the bike feels planted, but you won't be very comfortable putting in long hours on the Scout Bobber's saddle. But for a jaunt around town or the occasional weekend ride, the Scout Bobber certainly makes for an entertaining companion. And to top it all, it looks absolutely stunning.
I absolutely love the way the Indian Scout Bobber looks. It's a head turner for sure, and it packs enough performance really to make your weekend rides very enjoyable. Well, it's more of an around town bike, and it's perfect for a Sunday morning breakfast ride to a biker's cafe like this one here. There's some things I don't like about this bike. If you're the kind of guy who goes on long rides, the horn is a little too weak, and the stiff suspension and handling may tire you out over a long day's ride. But that said, if I were to look for a cruiser in my garage, I would certainly keep the Indian Scout Bobber in my mind.
It certainly is a very good looking cruiser, and if you're the occasional weekend kind of rider, you could certainly take a long, close look at the Scout Bobber. It looks good and has an entertaining personality performance-wise. At 11,99,000 rupees ex-showroom, it makes sense as a second or third bike. But for a daily ride or as your primary motorcycle, it lacks the practicality to make it a compelling buy. But then it looks so good, you may as well bring it home and make it yours.